Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, May 16th, 2024. My name is John Pieranunzi, and this is the opening swing. Sorry to report, guys, but the camera's fixed, huh? Let's begin today, as we always do, with our news. Europe is slightly lower. No real top-tier data out of Europe, but slightly lower. Kind of the post-CPI enthusiasm is cooled. Coming into the U.S. hours, our 8:30 news drivers are housing starts and permits, jobless claims, Philly Fed, import and export prices. Also before the bell, we have industrial production coming out at 9:15, one of those sort of off-time numbers. The natural gas report at 10:30. Then we have Harker, Mester, Bostic, and also Barr today, who's not on this calendar. We also have some announcements out of Treasury land and some short-term bill auctions. So that's what we have on offer today. Let's give a very quick look at higher time frame charts here, just to give a nod to the fact that we did not get the inside month I was looking for. We got a take of the all-time highs. I'd mentioned this chart was in balance. However, I would say if we're above the prior month's high, it's price discovery higher. Falling back into the prior month's range, balance with a skew for higher prices. Looking at the weekly chart, the bullishness is just palpable. We're above the prior week's range and making progress, holding the all-time highs. So it gets a little bit more bullish as we go down on the time frames. And we see that even more when we look at the daily chart, where the month of May was just spectacular if you own U.S. equities. So the month of May just rallied like crazy. Yesterday on the CPI release, we got the repricing higher. I was really looking at the 85s to O's as a key range to trade, and we got into that on the number and pushed higher. So the 08s got into 85s to O's, and then we're able to push through that 0708 region. That 0708 region for me will be important today. We also have an RTH gap zone left below the 85s or 83s. So you can see right here, this sort of area. If you can see where the cursor is, we have this repricing, which is happened on the number, and it's our gap zone, and then above we sort of have this sort of choppy area of the profile where we've carved out these prices. So let's get into some smaller time frame charts and speak a little bit more specifically. Here we have our 4x5 PNF, kind of seeing the structure. As I said, of the ideas we talked about yesterday, the one that was closest to the action was a quick repricing off the number, then a grind in this 85 to O's area. It's kind of a choppy sort of zipper, and then finally pushing above the O's. We got into the 08s, 07s, and from there it was just a drift higher. So as I've said, we have this range that's been established above the 86s. Yesterday's RTH low, this whole area, 83s to 86. We have this kind of range, and we have this sort of toothy area in the middle with this kurtotic distribution. So for me, what I'm kind of just looking at very generally when I see this action is we're either going to stay up here above these 16 to 22s, or if we don't respect that area, we become more likely, in my opinion, to drop in for a test of the 03s to 08s. Let's discuss that on a smaller time frame chart. Okay, here we have our 2x4 PNF. Let's give a quick discussion of what areas are important. We have the developing overnight low. We have yesterday's VPOC. We have that 16 to 22 region I talked about, and then below that, 08s to 03s. Below the 08s to 03s, we have the RTH low from yesterday, one time frame break. Then we have the 75 to 69 region I talked about yesterday with the overnight VPOC naked, and then we have the 60s to 64s, which is a key area. Above, we have our developing overnight high, the 50 strike, and really up here above the all-time high, it gets a little bit sketchier because these prices have never been traded. But I look at the option strikes, they're important, the 50s and the 75s, and that's really all we can go on. FT uses measured moves. I like those too, but use them a little less. So let's talk today, right now, about the most bullish and also most boring scenario, but let's just talk about it. The most bullish or boring scenario would be a hold of any prices, in my opinion, above yesterday's VPOC, above this sort of 25-ish area. This could be anything, could happen pre-market or, after the bell, but any kind of a hold, potentially holding the developing overnight low that just kind of grinds up and just very weakly takes the overnight high and then just commences the action that we all kind of know and love of just shallow pullbacks, continuing, taking the targets, probably respecting yesterday's range, but not giving us enough risk reward for a good trade. So it's just this kind of grind. This is unfortunately what I think is probably pretty possible today. As I always talk about with that action, we are vulnerable to a more aggressive push lower that then cannot take the prior high, and then if we see that an aggressive push lower that can't take the prior high and then does take the prior low, then we'll start to look for targets below. So that is how we could sort of have this grind, and then if we get a reversion, that could turn to a reversion lower. If that happens, if we get back into the prior range and we're looking for the prior settle, this area 33s to 37s, it's important. It's our prior settle and the prior all-time high. Getting below that, then we're looking for 16 to 22s, as I've said, and then beneath that, 08s to 03s. If this area, and I'll flag as well discussing this, as I have, any kind of a pullback in any of these areas would be subject to a push higher. Oops, that's the wrong color. Would be subject to a push higher that is able to take the prior high, which would just continue things. Any of these areas. Most specifically, I would be looking for it potentially in the 20s. If we're below the 20s, then the 03s, this is an area I would expect support. Should we breach below the 03s, I would expect it to get choppy, but then eventual support above the O's, which would kind of turn the bullishness back on for me. So very generally speaking, my most expected scenario today is some type of grind that goes higher and could potentially pull back. Let's talk about other ways it could get bullish. We could see some type of a push lower early into one of these areas that just reverts and continues, like a quick push, and this could happen at any of these areas, just a quick push that doesn't get the high initially, trades down potentially into this area. This is a pretty unauctioned area, so we may need to push down into it and sort of chop around a little bit before we get the trade that might be worthwhile. But as always, if we get that and we're failing to get the prior high, like if we get what looks like it could be something like this, but we fail to take that high, and then we do get that low, then we're starting to look for lower prices. But generally speaking, my very broad plans today are any of these areas down to yesterday's low would be areas that I could potentially target for a quick short, but would be aware that we could revert higher at any of these areas. I could target them if I get a technical setup for a short, but I'm aware that we could make a structured move higher. That's what I will be thinking with sort of all the area above yesterday's RTH low. Let's just discuss for a second some action that could happen if we breach the RTH low. If we should breach the RTH low today in some way, shape, or form, there will be buyers waiting below the RTH low. That's going to happen. Whether those buyers get higher prices, we're not sure, but the first possibility is obviously we test below, try to continue, can't, there's buyers, and we get back above, and then again, it's the same old stuff. So that's a strong possibility. However, if we get into this area, push, try to get above, but then cannot, then the targets we're looking for, 75s. And I'll mention as well, like if we would fall below this 83 to 86 area today. If that would happen today, first off, I'm not expecting it. I'm not. But if it happens, it would change the environment for me. Below these 86s, grinding through here, like I said, we're looking for 75s, and then 64s would be the key target test below this area. I'm not expecting price to get below 64 today. If we hit it, I'm expecting support on the initial push. So that's what I'm seeing today, guys. Just very generally speaking, I'm looking at a lot of these areas, as I've just said, pretty basic trading. Any of these areas could be a place where if we pull back, it could continue. And as long as we get the prior high, bullishness, the bullishness remains in control. If we cannot get the prior high and we do one of these, then we're looking for potentially the targets lower and maybe a setup at a lower price. We have to keep in mind, though, we will get stronger version at some point during this. I'm not necessarily expecting it to be today. Tomorrow's a day that, you know, something else like that could happen, but I'm flagging that. I've been very bullish based on the environment, but we also have to be aware that there is going to be a day when we get a strong repricing lower. So just something to be aware of, but I wanted to flag all that. Some technical problems with the video today, so this is going to be late. I apologize for that, but we're going to fix those at some point. I have to change the software I'm using. But I'll wrap it up today. I hope everyone has a wonderful day going in progress, and I hope it can continue. I hope you can improve your trading in some way, shape, or form today. And as always, I hope that you can make someone else smile today, because that's the key to a good day. And so I guess that's everything. Let's get out there and clock some ticks, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.